At the far end of Birchwood Lane, a soft amber light flickered against the storm-darkened windows of the small cottage, like a beacon against the howl of the wind. Eloise Carter moved quietly around her modest kitchen, her hands carefully adding another log to the old wood-burning stove that had kept her warm for the better part of 15 winters since she lost her husband, Henry. At 75, Eloise had developed a slow, deliberate grace, the kind born of patience and years of navigating loss. Her silver hair, still thick, was pulled back into a simple bun, unchanged since her days as a schoolteacher. The house felt eerily silent without Henry's warm presence filling the empty spaces. The silence had only grown deeper after their son, Daryl, chose his reckless lifestyle over family, showing up only when his pockets were empty. His wife, Shanice, would stand behind him, her sharp eyes scanning the house and her lips curled into judgment. Eloise's gaze drifted to the mantel, where a picture of Henry, smiling with her arm wrapped around his waist on their wedding day, stood beside a hand-carved wooden box Henry had made himself. Inside, nestled in delicate tissue paper, lay a tiny pair of knitted booties in soft blue. Those were the only mementos she had of their grandchild, who had passed from a fever after just 3 days of life. The sudden pounding on the front door cut through the storm's fury, followed by the unmistakable wail of an infant, a cry that seemed to claw into Eloise's very soul. She moved swiftly toward the door. Through the frosted window, she could make out 2 figures, their forms hunched against the bitter wind. "Please, ma'am," came a voice, deep and desperate, filled with a rawness that tightened Eloise's chest. "My baby can't take much more of this cold. Please, we just need somewhere warm for her." The man was enormous, his broad shoulders strained against a weathered leather jacket with patches Eloise couldn't make out. Cradled against his chest was the source of the heart-wrenching cries. Behind him stood a young woman, no older than 26, her thin frame shivering violently, her coat soaked through by the relentless snow. "We've knocked on 4 other houses already," the woman called, her voice breaking with exhaustion and fear. "One man saw Jack's jacket and slammed the door before we could even ask." Eloise felt her heart ache as she listened to the woman plead. "Please, I'm begging you. My daughter is only 6 weeks old, and she's so cold I can barely feel her breathing." Eloise's hand hovered over the deadbolt as her mind raced with the warnings she had heard all her life about letting strangers into her home. But the baby's cries, weak, fragile, pierced through her defenses. All at once, every maternal instinct that had been dormant since the death of her grandson came rushing back. The deadbolt clicked open with a soft, echoing sound, and Eloise opened the door, letting the warmth of her home spill into the freezing night. "Come inside, all of you, right now," she said firmly, her voice carrying the calm authority she had once used with her students. "No child should be out in weather like this." The man stepped across the threshold, unwrapping the blankets from around the infant with careful hands. "Thank you so much, ma'am. I'm Jack Morrison, and this is my wife, Layla, and our daughter, Zoey." He spoke quickly, clearly trying to explain, but his exhaustion weighed on his words. "We were on our way back from a rally when the storm hit." Layla staggered inside behind him, her face pale, her teeth chattering with cold, though her eyes never left the baby as Jack gently placed her into Eloise's waiting arms. Eloise cradled the small child against her chest, feeling her tiny body shiver before the warmth from the stove began to seep into her. "Sweet little one," Eloise murmured, her voice soft and soothing, swaying gently as she had done countless times with her own children when they were small. "You're safe now, darling girl." Layla positioned herself close to the stove, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as she began to thaw. Eloise, moving with practiced ease, began heating water to prepare a bottle of formula she kept stocked for the occasional visits from local families with young children. "Most people see Jack's jacket, see those patches, and they think we're trouble," Layla said, accepting the steaming cup of tea Eloise pressed into her hands. "They don't see that he's the hardest working man I know, that he spends 16 hours a day at the garage just to keep us going." Eloise nodded, a soft smile touching her lips. "People are too quick to judge based on appearances," she replied quietly. "They see the leather and the ink and think they know everything, but they miss the love in a father's eyes when he's protecting his child." As Eloise looked down at Zoe's peaceful face, something deep inside her stirred, like a long-closed door creaking open. The baby's features reminded her so much of her grandson, and before she could stop herself, Eloise found herself speaking. "I had a grandson once," she said, her voice soft. "He was the most beautiful baby, with eyes just like yours, Zoey. I had him for only 3 days before a fever took him from us. I couldn't save him, but I can make sure your little one stays warm tonight." Layla's eyes filled with gratitude, and she reached out, her hand trembling as she took Eloise's. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "But you did. I don't even know how to thank you." Eloise smiled faintly, brushing a stray curl from the baby's forehead. "Don't thank me," she replied softly. "Just keep her warm." As the fire in the stove crackled and the room filled with the rich scent of burning wood, Eloise settled back into her old rocking chair, gently rocking Zoey in her arms. For the first time in years, the quiet seemed not so heavy. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the warmth held, steady and constant. When dawn broke, the storm had spent itself, leaving the small town blanketed in deep snow. Pale sunlight filtered weakly through the frost on Eloise's window, casting a thin golden stripe across the wooden floor. Jack was the first to stir, carefully unfolding his tall frame from the chair where he had kept watch. Layla lay curled on the couch, Zoey snuggled against her chest, wrapped in the wool scarf Eloise had loaned her. The snow outside had piled up against the steps, glittering beneath the soft light of early morning. They gathered their few belongings, moving quietly, as if reluctant to disturb the stillness of the house. They paused often to glance at the window, where the pristine white world lay undisturbed. When they stepped outside, the silence of the morning was broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Jack paused, his breath steaming in the cold air, then walked back toward Eloise. He took her hand in his, the roughness of his fingers a stark contrast to her worn but gentle touch. "Most of this town shut their doors on us," he said quietly, his voice heavy with both gratitude and disbelief. "But you opened yours. Hell's Angels don't forget that. I'll come back for you. That's a promise." Layla stepped forward, her eyes filled with emotion, and pulled a small woven bracelet from her coat pocket. "I made this for Zoey," she said, nodding toward the baby, "but I want you to have it." Eloise slipped the bracelet over her wrist, the vibrant colors standing out against her dark skin. She watched as Jack and Layla made their way down the street, their figures shrinking against the endless white, until the snow and light swallowed them from sight. 1 week later, Eloise heard the familiar rumble of motorcycles turning onto Birchwood Lane. The sound, once alarming, now filled her with anticipation. Jack Morrison walked up the front path, his stride confident, but without the urgency that had marked his arrival during the storm. Today, he wore a simple button-down shirt instead of the leather jacket, and his eyes, darker now with the soft light of the morning, seemed warmer. Behind him, Layla carried Zoey, who was now chubby and rosy-cheeked, the picture of health. "Mrs. Carter," Jack called out as he reached the front steps, his voice warm with a newfound respect. "We wanted to come see you properly and explain some things that might help you understand why what you did meant so much to us." Eloise opened the door wide, ushering them into her kitchen with the same welcoming smile she had used for so many years. As Layla settled Zoey into the high chair that had been gathering dust since her own children had outgrown it, Eloise marveled at how much the baby had grown in such a short time, her cheeks fuller, her eyes brighter. Jack cleared his throat and pulled a small envelope from his pocket, a subtle reverence in his movements. "Before we go any further," he began, "I need to explain something about who we really are." He looked at Eloise with a steady gaze. "The Hells Angels aren't what most people think we are, at least not our chapter. We're just people who love motorcycles, freedom, and family. It's about loyalty. It's about helping others." Layla nodded, her eyes meeting Eloise's with an honesty that made Eloise's heart swell. "We're not criminals. Jack works as a mechanic, and I teach piano to the neighborhood kids. We ride because they're our family." Jack gestured toward the envelope in his hands. "When you opened your door that night, you didn't just save our daughter. You saved all of us." Inside the envelope, Eloise found an amount of money larger than she had seen in years, along with a handwritten note. The money had been collected during a charity ride, with every member contributing whatever they could afford. "This is too much," Eloise whispered, her hands trembling as she touched the note. "I didn't help you because I expected any reward," she continued, her voice firm. "I helped because it was the right thing to do." Jack shook his head, his expression gentle yet determined. "This isn't about what you expected or what we owe. This is about honoring people who live by our values. You showed us that not everyone judges by appearances. Some people still care about what's inside." Layla leaned forward, her voice earnest. "Besides the money, we'd like to help with some work around your house, if you'll let us." She gestured toward the window where several motorcycles were parked along the street. Eloise could see men unloading tools, ready to help with any repairs. "We've got carpenters, electricians, and painters in our group, professionals who want to donate their time." As Zoey crawled across the kitchen floor, her chubby hands reaching out for Eloise's skirt, Eloise felt her heart swell with emotion. She reached down to lift the baby into her arms, and Zoey giggled in delight, her blue eyes sparkling. "My goodness, you've gotten so big in just 1 week," Eloise murmured, laughing through the tears that had sprung to her eyes. 3 days later, Eloise stood in the lobby of the Maple Valley Children's Home, bags of donations in hand, her heart full of purpose. The orphanage, situated on the outskirts of town, was underfunded but filled with love. Eloise had spoken with Carol Henderson, the director, a woman whose dedication to the children in her care had earned her the admiration of the entire community. As Eloise stepped through the door, a chorus of young voices greeted her, and a boy about 7 years old, missing his front teeth, ran up to her, calling out, "Grandma Eloise." The boy's words made Eloise's heart flutter, a reminder of Marcus when he was young. She unpacked blankets in bright colors, baby formula, vitamins, and toys, placing them carefully where they would do the most good. At the bottom of the second bag was an envelope with enough money to fix the orphanage's broken heating system. "This is going to save us all, Eloise," Carol said, her voice thick with emotion. "It's going to save the babies." But even as Eloise felt the satisfaction of doing something good, she couldn't ignore the whispers that had begun around town. The sight of motorcycles parked outside her home for days had not gone unnoticed, and the gossip that followed was not kind. The news reached the far corner of the county, where Marcus and Shanice lived in a cramped apartment. Tiffany, ever eager to stir trouble, was the one to bring it up. "Your mother's been hanging out with bikers," she said, her voice full of scorn. "They fixed her house and gave her money. I hear she's hiding it somewhere in that old place of hers." Marcus, who had been slouched at the table, suddenly sat up, his eyes narrowing. He poured another drink, the alcohol sloshing against the rim, and downed it in one motion. Later that night, at a bar where Marcus spent most of his time, Tiffany leaned in, a smile playing on her lips as she whispered, "Funny, isn't it? The bikers get to play heroes, and your own mother gets nothing." "Nothing." Marcus slammed his hand against the table, the force rattling the glasses. "That's my house," he growled. "Everything in it's mine." Tiffany's smirk widened. She had him exactly where she wanted him. That night, under the pale light of the moon, Tiffany led Marcus back to Eloise's house. The cold was biting, the air still, as they approached the old wooden porch. Tiffany's heels clicked on the ground, her laugh hollow and mocking. "This is it," she said loudly, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is what you're so proud of." Inside, Eloise was just finishing up her evening routine when the sound of broken furniture and drawers being ripped open cut through the house. Marcus had started his search, knocking things over in a drunken rage. Tiffany was kneeling by the old cabinet, yanking out drawers. The fire in the stove had almost died, the warmth fading as a piece of kindling was kicked across the room. Tiffany turned, her voice mocking. "Look at this," she said to Marcus. "Your mother, too good for her son, letting bikers fix her roof and feed her." Jack and 3 other men from the Hells Angels arrived just in time. Jack moved swiftly, positioning himself between Marcus and Eloise, his jaw tight, but his voice calm. "This woman," he said, his tone unwavering, "saved my family when your town slammed its doors in our faces. You put a hand on her, you go through me first." Marcus took a step forward, but the unspoken challenge in Jack's eyes made him pause. Jack didn't shout. He just stood, unmoving, a rock in the storm. Minutes later, the sound of engines filled the air, first one, then 3, then more, until the street was alive with the low rumble of a dozen motorcycles. The riders, all members of the Hells Angels, rolled into formation. The leader of the pack, an older man with silver streaks in his beard, stepped forward. "Mrs. Carter is our friend," he said, his voice carrying over the engines. "She's an honored name in our chapter. You'd be wise not to test the strength of that." From across the street, curtains shifted as neighbors peered out. The sight was nothing like what the town had imagined. It wasn't the dangerous, chaotic image they had conjured. The bikers weren't here to cause trouble. They were here to protect. A police cruiser pulled up soon after, drawn by the noise. But as the officers took in the scene, they saw the damage Marcus had caused. The younger officer, his gaze shifting from Marcus to Eloise, quickly assessed the situation. The next thing Marcus knew, he was being led away, his words slurring as he protested. Tiffany followed behind, the second officer at her side, his voice cold as he informed her she'd need to answer questions at the station. The bikers, now standing in the yard, remained silent, their presence a quiet shield around Eloise. When the cruiser pulled away, Jack turned to Eloise. "I'm sorry you had to see that," he said quietly, his voice softer than before. Eloise reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm despite the chill in the air. "Thank you, Jack. You've done more for me than I can say," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "But I still hope. One day, Marcus will come back to me, the way he used to be." Jack nodded slowly, his grip firm. "You're his mother," he said, his voice steady. "You don't stop hoping." Outside, the engines slowly fell silent. The air, once full of noise, became calm again. The fire in the stove crackled back to life, and the smell of cinnamon from the pastries lingered, mingling with the warmth. The storm outside had passed, but the warmth inside would remain. That winter settled in heavy and slow, and Eloise's door remained open to anyone who needed it. Week after week, Jack and Anna returned, not just with gifts but with their time. They helped with the small tasks that had grown more difficult for Eloise. One evening, they sat around the table together, a simple meal shared in warmth and quiet happiness. Jack reached across the table and took Eloise's hand in his. "When the whole town turned away from us," he said quietly, "you opened your door. I can't be your son, but—" He paused, searching her eyes. "If it's all right with you, I'd like to call you Mom." The words hit Eloise like a breath of fresh air, and without thinking, she rose from her chair to wrap Jack in a tight embrace. Anna smiled softly as she placed Zoey in Eloise's arms. "This is the child you saved that night," she said gently. "One day, she'll call you Grandma." As Zoey giggled in Eloise's arms, Eloise couldn't help but laugh too. The warmth in her chest felt like it could never fade.